My name's Christine Gerard. I'm the new director of Torch. This is our second book at lunchtime of the term, but the first one that I have ever introduced. I'm thrilled to be introducing One-Hit Wonders, an oblique history of popular music. So for those of you who are new to Book at Lunchtime, and I know that some of you are, this is one of Torch's long-standing flagship events. And this goes back 10 years to 2013 when Torch started out. And we have a film of every book featured in this series. So it's a kind of growing history and a library of discussions about great books. So the videos of all our previous discussions are on our website and YouTube channel. And over the years, we've featured an extraordinary variety of books and authors. So today, as I said, we're privileged to welcome Professor Sarah Hill from St Peter's College in Oxford, who I think actually does have the title of Professor of Pop Music. Have I got that right? Yeah. Roughly speaking, which is wonderful. I'd love to be a professor of pop music instead of a professor of 18th century literature, which sounds much more boring. And to discuss One-Hit Wonders, a book that's garnered a great deal of critical acclaim and some exceptional reviews upon its publication. I'll read some of these glowing reviews. One-Hit Wonders is a treasure trove of analysis into why particular songs resonate at specific moments in history and how quickly they can date. To quote another critic, one-hit wonders are pop's overachieving underachievers, winners, but losers that stretch categories up to a point. I'd like to just put my penny's worth in here, that I absolutely love this book. It's partly because it brought back memories of many of the songs that come from really my childhood, I think, and later periods of my life. I found the combination of critical analysis and historical context really interesting in understanding how, for example, a catchy tune like Norman Greenbaum's "Spirit in the Sky" actually has this really complicated theological kind of legacy to it. And I was very moved by the piece on 99 Luftballon because I'm half German and my grandparents lived in Berlin, so that song has enormous memories for me. And I just think it's such a creative way of thinking about popular hits and the hinterland behind them. So for those of you who haven't yet read it, please, go and do it. And I'm going to hand over discussion now to my colleague, Professor Patrick McGuinness and Dr. Di Griffiths. And we're looking forward to a really enlightening discussion. And maybe even some musical performances if you can suppress us, Thank you very much indeed. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and welcome then to Book at Lunchtime. So my job will be to introduce Sarah and Di and to manage, perhaps line manage, I guess, a discussion both about the book and about the larger issues that the book brings forward. But first I will introduce our two speakers. So Sarah Hill, who is sitting to my right, is the editor of this fantastic and very searching compendium. She's Professor of Popular Music and Fellow of St Peter's College. She's coordinating editor of the journal Popular Music and has published on popular music historiography, music and politics, and music and cultural identity, particularly as it relates to the Welsh language. And it does in fact happen that the three of us could be conversing in Welsh right now, but we're in fact going to do it in English to help you guys along. Her most recent book was San Francisco in the long 1960s, and I've known Sarah for many years through the Cardiff nexus, and I was very privileged and a little scared to be asked to write for this book, where I contributed my penny's worth on Plastique Bertrand and Ça plane pour moi. So I have a small Belgian dog in the race this afternoon. Also at the table is Di Griffiths, who until 3 years ago was Professor of Popular Music at Oxford Brookes University. He's the author of two books that I know of, a book on Elvis Costello, and the one that I know of because I've also read it is his superb short book in the 33 and a third series by Bloomsbury on Radiohead's OK Computer, which is one of the finest pieces of musical analysis and cultural analysis of popular music that I've ever read. And thank you both for coming. So the form of the event will be, I'm going to invite Sarah, first of all, to read from the book. And I'm assuming she's going to read from the introduction.
Yes.
And then I will make a few remarks on the book as a whole and on what she has read, and then Di will follow with doubtless more informed remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. So I will be reading the introduction. It's very short, but I think it gives you a good idea of what the project was intended to do, how we set about doing it, and why we all might have different ideas about what should have been included in it. So the remit was simple. Choose a song, any song, and write about it. The follow-up was a bit trickier. Make sure that it was the sole hit for that musician or band. Now off you go. Among the group of scholars, critics, and writers who accepted my challenge, there was quite a bit of chatter. What do you mean by a hit? A hit where? Here's the first snag. When we talk about one-hit wonders and chart hits, the hit is the song, the wonder is the musician. Our points of reference are usually the Billboard Hot 100 or the official UK charts. Charts exist in other countries, of course, but the historical dominance of the multinational record companies and the vast reach of their global products led to the commercial dominance of particular styles and genres and of songs sung in English. The charts offer a snapshot of which songs or albums sold the most copies in a given week or year, and since 1958, the Recording Industry Association of America, or the RIAA, has recognized units sold by the bestowal of commemorative discs in a range of expensive metals. Gold for 500,000 units, platinum for 1 million, multi-platinum for 2 million, diamond for 10 million, and so on. Does this mean that gold records are historically the most important, or most influential, or most memorable songs ever recorded? Of course not. But does it mean that they are popular? Yes. Case in point, Macarena by Los Del Rio, released in August 1995, was certified gold by the RIAA in May 1996, platinum in July 1996, double platinum in August 1996, triple platinum in September 1996, and quadruple platinum in October 1996. A one-hit wonder? Absolutely. Included in this collection? Alas, no. But it is worth thinking a little bit more about Los Del Rio regardless. They had a minor hit on the US Latin pop album charts with A Mi Me Gusta from 1993, but for some reason, Macarena was the right song at the right time, as judged by its top placement on the charts in Australia, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Israel, the Netherlands, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United States. None of their subsequent releases even registered, apart from the occasional spin-off, and here I'll note that there was apparently a Macarena Christmas. But do not pity Los Del Rio. Theirs is the kind of success or ubiquity that many bands would kill for. Would Macarena have been a global hit if it had not been remixed with new English lyrics? Maybe not. Spanish songs have reached the top of the Billboard charts in the past, La Bamba most notably, as have songs in French, German, Korean, and, yes, Latin. But Macarena had one more thing going for it, the choreography. Dance crazes occupy a special place in the history of pop music, from the Charleston, 1926, to the Twist, 1960, and right up to the viral dances fighting for space on the virtual floor today. These are the dances that we recognize, whether by the tune or the beat or the hook. To situate Macarena in this noble tradition, the guests at a wedding reception in Winnipeg might not be able to sing along to the verses, but they can shout the refrain, "Hey Macarena," hands on their booty, swaying left, right, left, turn to the right, and on we go. In other words, lyrics are not always the most important component of a hit song. To use another example, not included in this collection, Van McCoy's The Hustle of 1975 captured the feel, if not the authentic experience, of New York disco culture in a song that boasted all of 5 words. Do it. Do the hustle. Its enduring popularity and the ease with which most people the world over can still join in the dance, step, 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 clap, should remind us how often underground cultures have been co-opted for financial reward. When a song is mainstreamed and decontextualized from its original culture, whether New York or Spain or any other place, it can continue to have a new life of its own, generating revenue for the record labels, songwriters, producers, and musicians in the process, if everyone is lucky. It would have been possible to start this collection with the dance crazes and novelty hits that littered parlor pianos and Victrola cabinets in the early years of the 20th century. There's plenty to say about satire and politics, humor and changing social mores in that prehistory of pop, and it has been said elsewhere. For the purpose of concision, we began this history in the late 1950s. And while the first chapter in the collection does focus on a novelty song, Flying Saucer by Buchanan and Goodman, it also establishes a prehistory of the music industry that should be familiar to anyone who has ever heard a song built on pre-existing samples. What you get in the subsequent chapters is a snapshot of popular music songwriting and marketing, of audiences and the vagaries of taste. Not every song in this collection came out of Anglo-America, and not every song was originally sung in English. But each one poses questions about cultural centers and peripheries, about timeliness and timelessness in an oblique history of popular music. In thinking about each song's time and place, most of the contributors to the collection also ruminate on their song's afterlife. Not every song included here has a dance attached to it, nor has every song been tied into television advertisements or movie franchises, but each has a story that takes it beyond a sterile Billboard number. Often that story is just about how the song hit the charts in the first place. This is not to suggest snobbery or value judgment, but rather to note that it is worth thinking a little bit about why some songs gain universal traction without any warning or precedent, and about how those songs impact on the lives and careers of the musicians behind them. To take another example not included in the collection, if asked to name a Proclaimers song, most people outside of Scotland would say, "I'm going to be 500 miles." It was certified gold by the RIAA in May 1993, and the album Sunshine on Leith, 1988, was certified gold in New Zealand and the United States, platinum by the BPI, and double platinum in Australia and Canada. The Proclaimers' career has spanned over 30 years, and that one song has made its way onto the singles charts at 3 different times and onto the soundtracks of nearly a dozen films and television series. What do we understand about the Proclaimers' popularity arc by the fact that they had one verifiable international top 10 hit 5 years into their career and yet maintained a fan base and audience for another 25 without any notice on Billboard? If nothing else, it shows that charts are no indication of lasting power or influence, and that worldwide popularity is a fickle beast. So all that was by way of introducing the collection of essays. Authors were given complete creative freedom to write about their chosen hit and their chosen wonder in whatever way they wanted. The chapters were ordered chronologically according to the song's release dates, and that, I hoped, would allow for an overview of changing musical styles and an occasional soft echo across the collections. The songs included here might not make your ideal mixtape, but our goal is to get you to go back and listen to them again with fresh ears. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there, in fact, a mixtape?
There is a playlist, a Spotify playlist.
Is it downloadable, findable?
It is findable. I sent it to John.
Fantastic. Maybe we can put it on the Torch website for our audience too. Brilliant. Thank you, John. Yes. So as I said in my, I'm just going to say a few words really from the point of view of the generalist here, but because most of my academic and literary time is spent writing about stuff that the syllabus, the university culture, the academy have told me is lasting. The opposite, in a sense, of the one-hit wonder, though a lot of us academics are also one-hit wonders ourselves. You know, we publish one book that gets occasionally read and put in some libraries, and then we spend the rest of our time trying to catch up with what we once were. But I was very struck by the brilliance and the intrinsic interest of thinking about what you were proposing to study here, which is a strange kind of interaction of ephemera and permanence as well. And I wondered whether, in a moment when I've finished my spiel, we could think about that in a larger sense and wonder about how it might apply perhaps outside music. I was very struck by the quote that Christine gave about how these musicians were winners but also losers in the grand game of pop. And certainly when I was researching my chapter on Plastique Bertrand's Ça plane pour moi, a song really of, and you know, I don't mind going on record as saying this, of quite extraordinary banality at the same time as equally extraordinary kind of catchiness, a proper earworm, and the word earworm keeps coming through in this book, doesn't it? And when we were exchanging emails this morning about the shape of this event, one of us had already had an earworm in their head, and I've got an earworm from last night when I was listening to Warren Zevon's Life Will Kill You. And so I wondered as well about what it is that makes particular songs compelling, not just in a kind of socio-historic context, which is mapped out beautifully in this book, but something maybe more, I hesitate to use the word spiritual, but something deeper, really. And I wondered how you had chosen your songs, because many of the musicians here I only knew because of this one song that was being thought about. But then I suddenly saw perhaps the band that I am most obsessed with, the Grateful Dead, who for me are the absolute antithesis of a one-hit wonder. They're a band of extraordinary and improbable stamina, except for dead ones. But you know, they have pure longevity, don't they? But they were in here for A Touch of Grey, which in technical terms is their one hit, because it's the one that was popular and got charted and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to ask a few questions really about how you chose. What is the definition of what it is that gets these songs into our heads, both personally and culturally? And I like the idea as well, maybe you could talk a bit about the idea of obliqueness, because that is really important too, isn't it? It's like the music history's B-sides too, isn't it? Where are the B-side? Everything you've written about here and the book as a whole has got implications, I think, for other ways of writing about other genres. I'm already thinking about the 19th century poets that I mostly study and have written my one-hit book about. And then I think about all the fantastic poems by poets we don't read anymore. And it's given me a new way, I think, of revisiting my familiar terrain. And then also, I suppose, that my final question is, what about other one-hit wonders? Are there particular ones that you regret who didn't even make it into the one-hit wonder book? Sorry, that's a lot of different, rather convoluted questions.
It's a lot of questions. I'll answer the last one first. There were a couple of chapters that couldn't get done in time. So the one that I regret most of all maybe was My Sharona. Not because it's a song I particularly love or cherish, although I remember hearing it as a kid, but because in retrospect, it would have been a really good counterpart to the chapter on Hot Child in the City. So it's all about objectification of young girls in very problematic ways that could only have happened in the 70s. And you know, there were other people had offered to write chapters and for whatever reason couldn't do it in the end. There's certainly any number of other songs that I could name that would have served as, you know, good chapters here. But, you know, they were largely the songs that I remembered. So a lot of the songs that I remembered from the 70s and the 80s would have made the book kind of balloon in all the wrong places. There weren't that many from the 1990s and 2000s and 2010s, because by that point, almost everything is a one-hit wonder now. I mean, the music industry exists in a completely different way now. Songs are promoted in a particularly different way, a totally different way. Charts mean different things now than they used to. So there's a problematic around that. We don't share the same cultural experience of listening to these songs on the radio every day in that summer of whatever, 1995. We don't all watch TikTok anymore, you know. So there's reasons that we don't know the same songs anymore. I think for everybody, deciding what song to write about had to do with, well, that was something that I always liked and I never knew why I liked it, so they wanted to find out something more. Or they're from a particular region of the world where that song meant something very different to how it meant to me as somebody who lived in California. So there's any number of ways that it could have blossomed, that it didn't blossom. But I think the slight connections between chapters that exist now, like there's two that just have to do with Orientalism and Japaneseness. There was this kind of flurry of interest in Japanese sounding things. So we have Turning Japanese and we have Japanese Boy. There are two songs in German, so there's Da 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 and 99 Red Balloons by Nena. And for whatever reason, French was the language that we all wanted to hear those years, and German was the language that we kind of accepted in those years. So it's, what does that say about the audiences? What does that say about how music can cross linguistic barriers and sort of spread around the world? I mean, there's many different ways I could go there, but I think I'm kind of going a little bit off.
It's certainly true that you learn a lot of about world history by reading this book.
True.
And it's kind of a shortcut to the last sort of 40 or 50 years in historical terms. I was very struck by something you said in your own article, Sarah, when in your own one of your own contributions, where you talk about the old days of the music industry, and you ask Eric Lyles, when a band got signed, how much time were they given to break before they would be dropped? One of the threads for me, maybe because I have this kind of rather dark view of success, is that this book is all about time, isn't it? And about how time is unforgiving, and that the one-hit wonder as an artifact, in a strange way, is the victim of time, and also transcends time. And I wondered whether, without being too philosophical, you could explore that nexus of the lasting and the ephemeral.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not really sure how best to answer it. There are a couple of examples in the book of artists who have really embraced the idea that this is the thing I'm going to be known for. So Norman Greenbaum does not mind singing Spirit in the Sky as an 80-year-old man to a bunch of hippies in Northern California. I know this for a fact. There are other bands that really bristle at the idea that I was only given that one chance. That's not really who we did it as a commercial necessity rather than as something that was, an artistic exploration of who we are as people. There's a chapter in here written by Mike Jones, who is a one-hit wonder, because he wrote a song that was a hit for a band called Latin Quarter. And he writes very searchingly about what they expected by being signed to a record label, what they were actually able to do, how they were not able to convert their one minor success into a much longer presence, or much sort of broader presence on the radio. And the thing that interests me so much is not really the ephemerality versus the permanence, but rather the way that the label one hit wonder is either accepted or rejected by the people that it's put on. And I think embracing the idea of being a one hit wonder, if you're the Grateful Dead, who, 50-year career, sold out, sold millions and millions and millions of tickets. I mean, an impossible number of concert tickets, yet they only had that one the one video. And why does anybody want to watch the Grateful Dead in music video? It's like a bunch of old men singing Touch of Grey. It was the weirdest thing. So, but I think they kind of, laughed about it and sort of understood it as, this is just the weirdness that we operate in. So it was really more about how the label lands on these different people and how it sort of impacts them as musicians that I found more interesting.
There's something else that came out of that same interview discussion with Eric Lyles, was the idea of the turntable song, which, the turntable record is defined here. A song that gets a lot of radio play but makes very little money for the record company. Songs that have got an amazing life on radio, but consumers don't feel the need to lay down their money and actually purchase the song. That strikes me as yet another extremely niche category. And I wondered if we could think, before I hand over to Di, about the final bit in that interview you do with Eric, where he talks about the record company would want to make money off the song because probably no one is going to buy the album of that one artist too. So, you know, the one-hit wonder is the casualty also of maybe a market that only wants them for that one song, but actually they do have albums behind them that no one's interested in, but they get a new life in this thing that I remember as a child in the 80s and late 70s, the compilation album. So he says, you know, the song's on a compilation, that's another revenue stream for the record label. And I'm sure I was in Woolworths in Bristol when the first, now that's what I call music, came out. And I wondered about how maybe that kind of anthologizing technology and that anthologizing way of thinking about music both saved and condemned some of these songs.
Yeah, definitely saved. The Now series, that's what I call music series. In the States, we had K-Tel Records. So my idea actually with the cover was for the cover of the book to look like a K-Tel album. So that's kind of why the garish orange and brown. It is as much about that song and all these other songs kind of go together because I remember them vaguely from that time in my life. It's a pre-packaged mixtape, so it's not something that your friend gives to you because the songs mean something to you personally. It's something that means the time or the atmosphere or the something about the zeitgeist. And the more problematic thing maybe is that the artists aren't necessarily benefiting from, financially from their inclusion on some of these records. I mean, the record labels might really like for that one hit from the band to be put on all these different compilation albums because they're getting the money, but the bands aren't necessarily getting money themselves. So that's how they get pigeonholed. Oh, you're just, 1974. Oh, you just sit next to these other songs that I remember from that compilation. So they're sort of their sense of agency in the process is lost, I think.
Can I just chip into that? I think number one is interesting because if you had a follow-up called Two Hit Wonders, it'd be like a whole lot more. And I've got loads of compilations back there called Greatest Hits, and so the title so implies that they're only the greatest from masses that they've left off. But you look at it and it's like 3 or 2, and then they're like fillers, So. Yeah.
But you used to have to buy the Greatest Hits album if you didn't want to buy the album.
Yeah, that's right.
That the single came from. But then you're stuck with all these other songs you don't want to listen to.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah.
I guess in a sense, targeted song buying has changed the whole ecosystem too.
Yeah. And do people buy songs anymore? I mean, you can stream playlists and you can stream Greatest Hits, but do you actually convert that into cash spent on product?
Exactly. Thank you very much. Di, let me hand over to you to grill Sarah.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I did a track by the Easy Beats called Friday on My Mind from 1966, I think. And it's strange, I'm in the collection, but I read the book, and these are the thoughts that occurred to me after reading the book. So it's as though even though I'm in it, I'm outside it, so to speak. And I'd call what I have to say one hit, 2 misses. I'm not so sure about the second one, by the way, but I think the first one I can run with. And the first thing to say is that we're all interested in records. This struck me. And I'll start with an anecdote taken from Mark Lewison's epic 2013 biography of the Beatles. And it's November 1962, and their record, Love Me Do, is assuredly not a one-hit wonder. It reached only number 17 in the British singles chart, but had lurked beneath that position week after week. They were playing a lot. Manager Brian Epstein receives royalty payment for sales of the record. EMI takes a cut, he takes a cut, and then he distributes the remainder equally to the 4 band members. Over £27 each. A particularly good day for Ringo Starr, since famously he didn't play drums on the record, somebody else did. 3 weeks later, and Epstein gets payment for the publishing royalty through a separate company, publishing royalty taken from various sources. And this is now specifically for the songwriters Lennon and McCartney. They receive £130 each, in addition to their £27 for the record. So what Lewison calls the wealth gap in the band is there from the start. So in this book, we're all interested in records, not publishing. And what's more, in nearly all the tracks, the songwriter is the recording artist. They've got a stake in it. The 4 exceptions out of the 28 are a couple of cover versions, including Hooked on a Feeling, Louie Louie, Sugar Sugar, which was a kind of pop creation, and Tony Basil's Mickey, where the author in the book is reasonably interested in Tony Basil rather than Chin and Chapman, who were massive pop songwriters, but songwriters. Why do we all go on about records? Well, it's easier to derive data. Charts, as Sarah just said, charts reflect relative sales for given periods, and awards like gold discs sum up specific sales in different territories. And Patrick and I both have things like, double platinum in Japan, number 4 in Belgium, that sort of thing. We all do that. Publishing, I found, is much more difficult to track down. Musicians might know what they've earned, but often don't. And the researcher needs to find the publisher, or better, the accountant. And they're loath to divulge, or indeed prohibited. But there is a world of one-hit wonder that arises from songwriting with no necessary link to the recording artist or the record per se. Think of all those one-hit actors and comedians, Natalie Imbruglia, Chesney Hawkes, Clive Dunn, Benny Hill, Nick Berry. And I reckon if there was a track I would do for a collection like that, it probably would be Clive Dunn's Grandad, or Nick Berry, what was it called? Every Loser Wins, he's from EastEnders, just to go on about who the songwriters were. Every Saturday night since I was 10, the one-hit wonder Barry Stoller is on television. And in the 1998 novel About a Boy, the protagonist is a rentier. He doesn't have to engage in paid labor, but neither is he of the aristocracy or the gentry. And the trick its author Nick Hornby devises is that the protagonist's dad was a one-hit wonder, writing a Christmas single that generates for his son substantial royalty every year. Christmas, of course, a classic season for the one-hit wonder. So that was one thing about records. The second thing that interested me was I was looking at this as somebody who's been engaged in popular music study for decades. I was interested to see how people write about popular music against certain sort of historical tendencies. One background in something that's going on in the book is that what was a separation between music journalism and music academia has blurred, and a lingua franca has emerged. People are interested, it seems to me, in biography and especially in popular culture, maybe with a bit of memoir thrown in. How do these tracks work culturally seem to me the governing question. And as the nearest the book has to hardcore music theory with its invigorating rectitude, I'm out on the limb. But the question that occurred to me against the history of popular music study was this, and I'm not so sure about this, by the way: what became of hardcore sociology? So, for example, few of us, it seems, as I remember, concern ourselves with the 7-inch vinyl single, or that bizarre invention, the CD single. It had 80 minutes of space, but there were 2 tracks. Changes in radio policy, economic effect of music video, nature of sales charts. Number 1 in, as you were saying, number 1 in 1962, not the same as number 1 2012. In the case of my band, the Easy Beats, there are at least 3 interesting sociological questions. One, why all the band's families had moved from Holland or Britain to Sydney in Australia. The 2 younger brothers of one of them subsequently forming the rock band AC/DC. Second, in turn, why an Australian rock band moved to London to record, a big story, setting a path for the Triffids and the Go-Betweens. And finally, why producer Shel Talmy of Chicago was there at all in London, how he got to produce them, and what production meant at the time. Had the late sociologist Richard Peterson contributed to the volume, I think he would have gone about it differently and posed the questions: why one-hit wonders? How are they socially constructed? What are the social conditions in which one-hit wonders work? So those are the two things I wanted to say, one about records and one about methodology.
Do I answer for the entire discipline when I speak?
Yes, please.
So, on behalf of Popular Music Studies, those are all really important questions. I think the idea of the record is an important one, and I think you make the important distinction that a record is one thing, but songwriting credits, performance credits are entirely different. So whatever residual money might have been left for the Easy Beats when Friday on My Mind came out, it wouldn't look like what the Beatles were getting.
Yeah. But the songwriters were in the band as well, remember?
Okay,
So,
but were they segregated to the extent that the...
I don't know. I don't know. Probably.
I would say you're right that a lot of the chapters in the book deal with songs that were written by members of the band, but not all of them by any means. And the ones that were written, so again, I'm sort of thinking about the chapter on Play That Funky Music, White Boy.
Yeah.
Deals a lot with the sort of the sociological side of things. I mean, he brings Raymond Williams into so Robert Fink, the professor of musicology at UCLA, wrote about black cherry, red cherry, what was it?
Wild cherry.
Wild cherry. It's like white cherry, red cherry, wild cherry. And draws on the sort of the tension that exists when a white person tries to cross the line into adopting black music and black musical form, and the opposite direction as well. So there is kind of sociology light in the collection.
Yeah. That's
the song that was written by a member of the band about something that authentically apparently happened. So there is sociology there. As we move into the sort of the second half of the book, we're not really dealing so much with the record as just a listening object. We're dealing with the visual component. So we're dealing a lot with how songs are presented as video, for video. So the thing that we're privileging becomes visual, not auditory. So that's an interesting tension. There's not a whole lot of film studies that come into it either. So did I deal with the sociology? Why nobody? Do you want me to say why nobody did something about analysis like you did?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I don't actually know why they didn't.
Yeah.
I think maybe trying to keep things kind of light and fluffy.
Yeah.
Instead of number crunchy.
Sure.
That would be my idea.
Yeah.
But you make the really good point in your chapter that the song proper is only about a minute.
Yeah.
And then it's just, let's do it again.
Do it again. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Is that what you mean by sort of you say the 1 minute wonder?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But that speaks to how people listened to music in 1966.
Yeah. And how he was working on radio, for example.
Yeah.
You know, that it would be this little 3 minutes between a lot of talk. And
Yeah, and you can imagine on a jukebox.
Yeah.
It probably converted to, singles sales.
Yeah.
But it sort of works on a number of different levels that don't exist right now.
Sure.
So
the question about sociology, see, I think that funky music chapter is a fantastic piece of and answers this question about race and how it's working culturally. When I used to teach popular music, everybody had to read this article called Why 1955, superb, by Richard Peterson. And he's talking about why did rock and roll appear when it did. He's got a lovely little footnote saying, you'll notice I haven't mentioned Elvis Presley at all. And he just goes on about, what is it? Record labels, publishing, big battle in publishing at the time, and radio, I think it is. And it really is, he's far from the text, he's not even pretending to be interested in text at all. So in a sense, we're right in there anyway, because we're I think a lot of people are really doing what I think John Fiske would describe as popular cultural study, which is to say it's like what impact the text is having out there.
Yeah. In some instances in the book, also the impact is being in the audience, or being the young girl hearing this older girl singing about sort of a proto-feminist text, or how do you as a young listener understand the thing that's being sung to you, how that shapes your experience, how that shapes your knowledge of yourself and the world, or what does being in a very, very loud concert do to your to your understanding of how a song sung by that band could make it onto the radio when the recorded version of their musical kind of style and ethos is so completely different to what they are live. So there are tensions around who's the listener, where is the listener placed, and how do they contribute to how does the music mean something different in each of those environments?
I was struck actually, but I think I've worked out that all but 4 of the tracks were published issued between 1966 and 98, I think. And there's so there's relatively stable conditions there. It's before the moment of download and streaming and so on. There's a couple towards the end. Ellis Jones's chapter is right in there.
The Gautier,
Yeah.
But again, you don't really think of that song without thinking of the video.
Yeah.
Or it's impossible to separate what we know from the look of the video from the sound of the song. So yeah, that becomes more the sort of the argument toward the end of the book. Was that your 7 minutes?
That's my 7 minutes.
Yeah.
It was 7 minutes bang on. A bit more actually.
So I was going to bring this part of the proceedings to a close before we open up for questions from the audience by asking one question and then making an observation. But my question is, you mentioned video. How much does video have to do with the success of the songs? And I remember as a child in Belgium being introduced to the idea of the tube, and until then, you really just heard the song on the radio. Then the video becomes an important part of it. In my chapter, I talked a little bit about the video of Plastique Bertrand's "Ça plane pour moi," but I didn't have much useful to say about it because I'm not from the right discipline to understand it. But how does video contribute to the durability or non-durability of the song? And can that be measured or assessed?
Yes, it can be. I think I would be interested to know if "Ça plane pour moi" existed as a video that was marketed to Anglophone audiences in its time, or if it was sort of cobbled together. So if it ever made it onto Top of the Pops or something, if he had to perform live, or if he had to...
I remember seeing it on Top of the Pops twice, one in the form of a video and once in the form of the great Top of the Pops, in a sense, consecration, which is when he was accompanied by Legs & Co., who were a dance troupe, incidentally, for people of a certain... So that marked his arrival, or the song's arrival, because as it happens, he didn't actually sing it, but that's part of the article.
Okay, I mean, there were some songs certainly in the 70s that had kind of official videos attached to them because the people couldn't come to, London to sing on Top of the Pops, Bohemian Rhapsody is a big example of that. Wasn't that the reason that Bohemian Rhapsody was a video, that they couldn't play it live?
Yeah.
Whatever. Oh, okay, it was a strike. Okay. All right. I mean, MTV began in 1980, 1981. So from that point onward, you were expected to sell your song as a visual experience as well. So anything post that point would have had this kind of knowing, we're all in on this game. I'm kind of lip syncing. I'm pretending I'm on stage and that there's an audience, but everyone looks really kind of uncomfortable and awkward. So as video sort of took over as the key kind of marketing tool of a lot of this music, They became much more inventive and slick and all the rest of it, which is how we end up with, Shakespeare's Sister's Stay and some of the other songs that we talk about in the book. So I think for that reason, like I mentioned, I talk about Blue Swede's Hooked on a Feeling, and that's a song I remember from a 45. People from, my daughter's generation and the generation in between, generations in between, would know that song from its association with Marvel movies or, any other kind of TV show. So there's automatically going to be a visual reminder of what the song is. That's not quite the same thing. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing that we associate so much the visual with the sonic. Is there any footage of the Easy Beats? Do you know?
There is, yeah, I found some, yeah.
But then the Archies, I mean, if you want to know what the Archies sounded like and looked like, the song was a cartoon.
It was a cartoon, yeah.
So it was marketed from the very start as a visual text, with all the sort of the trappings of a live sort of band and concert, although it was a cartoon. So I'm kind of going off topic now, but I mean, there was always video kind of attached to it, but it wasn't really until after 1980 that it became kind of the primary text in some ways. So you don't think about the record so much as you think about the video. Yeah, this comes through in my interview about sort of artist management. Not everybody wants to have a long recording career. Some people might just want to have the one sharp, hit that speaks to everybody, make a whole lot of money, and then retire. The ability to do that, I think, shifted in about 1980 or so. I think it was possible at one point to have a really, like, the one big Christmas hit, and just that's me done for my career. I think that actually did happen. And I think if you were aiming for that kind of success, just I want the one hit that's going to, buy me my house in Barbados, then that's what you would do. A lot of people just, kind of try, and this doesn't really land, so I'll try something different, or they have a little bit more breathing room to try different kinds of styles. There's also just a lot of accidents that happen. I mean, people make records for different reasons, not necessarily to be a commercial success. Certainly some of the bands that are in this book that are kind of independently minded, so they weren't out for mainstream success. Chumbawamba, Tub Thumping, was not intended to be a big hit record, and they were accused of selling out because they're making all this money off of it. But they gave all their money to, kind of socialist collectives and all kinds of stuff. So not everybody wanted to make money. Not everybody wanted to have a long recording career. So for every example in the book, there's a different kind of set of responses. But I think it's also true that the music industry is pretty brutal. And you can think, I've got this really great record that I want the whole world to hear, and it just doesn't sell anything. And the next thing you know, you don't have another record coming out. So
Mike Jones's creed occurs has been all along is about that the industry is about managing failure as much as managing success. Yeah.
And the industry doesn't really care because they make the money in the end. Yeah. So you want to? What can you say about British DJs?
I can't think of any now, but I know there were cases where records were sort of pulled out by DJs. This sometimes used to even happen in clubs as well. It was be reported that certain tracks were having a great impact and were then promoted as.
So even if you weren't in the club, you would read the press, and the press would be talking about this great new sound coming out of Belgium. I mean, it does happen, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, it does.
Yeah.
Jacques Brel?
In a club?
No.
Yeah. So.
Well, sometimes actually,
Okay,
yes. In the club in my small town when I was growing up, there's always a bit of Brel in there, yeah.
Well, so I mean, there can be maybe that's how Macarena hit, or maybe that's how we all know the hustle. is because it would be the dance that everybody kind of learned how to do, and then it would sort of make its way into more mainstream clubs, and everybody would learn the dance, and then it would be on TV, and then you see it that way. I think with some of the non-Anglophone songs that made it into this book, the stuff from Germany, the stuff from, the sort of anything that's sort of French or, a different language, I think that would have been because there was somebody who was championing it, however that worked, whether it was on the radio or in a club or something.
It is interesting to wonder how and why songs not in English make it.
Yeah.
Which ones? I mean, 99 Red Balloons, I can see exactly why, because it's actually a very beautiful song about something, whereas Ça plane pour moi, less so. But you can see why it's catchy, but its extraordinary tenacity is something rather more difficult to explain.
No, 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 not at all. The finished product looks very much like what the proposal for the book looked like, apart from the people who couldn't contribute in the end. So My Sharona. There's another one. Yeah, there are a couple that sort of had to get chosen, but no, nothing that I rejected. Yeah. Probably not very much. I mean, I guess there's still maybe the trophy thing of I want the gold record on my wall, for somebody. It doesn't, but it's not really going to mean anything. Because again, people aren't really buying music, and 50 million streams on Spotify is probably not translating into 50 million units sold. Yeah, not even that, I would imagine. Yeah. So you were talking about entirely different terrains. I wonder if the Rolling Stones really need another #1 record. I mean, they'll do it because they can do it. But I forgot about James Blunt though.
Yeah. I was struck by this idea that the Stones never lacked a big hit as well, because they I'd have to check the figures and everything, but obviously there's big ones back there.
Satisfaction would have been a #1.
I would have thought, yeah.
No, because with Some Girls and sort of their 80s revival period, they had some big hits on that, Shattered and things like that.
Yeah. But there's hits and there's hits. I found myself thinking about the band Toto for some reason. And I was looking at the Toto discography, albums and singles. And if you look, there's one hit on the first album. It's got this manic piano part on it.
Hold the Line?
That's the one.
Yeah.
Then there's 2 albums. Then there's Toto 4, which has Rosanna, and the Timeless Africa. And Africa is crazy in terms of sales. It's like you're in your James Blunt land in terms of it's massive. And so if there had been the famous greatest hits at that point, there were 3 big hits on 4 albums. They're still going, So now it's three big hits on 15 Toto albums, So this thing about what this James Blunt Rolling Stones, what you mean by hit and how that shifts historically. That's the thing.
So what happens in a concert setting where people go to the concerts wanting to hear Rosanna, Hold the Line, and Africa?
Yeah.
You don't want to be there when the band says, "No, something off our new album."
No.
Everyone goes to get their beer.
That's right. Yeah.
So the greatest hits thing. Was it you that in your Radiohead book where you're talking about the CD length being a curse because you have to fill 72 minutes.
That's right. Yeah. They all got longer. Yeah.
Everything got longer, so it's all kind of relative.
That's right. Yeah.
Time for one more question.
I can't speak to K-pop necessarily. There's a certain formula to some songwriting, that there's certain kinds of structures and sounds that are always going to be appealing to a large group of people. So you think about the Motown record label, much of their output was very similar because they used the same musicians on all the records and same songwriters wrote most of the songs and the same there was a certain sound that went along with that stable of that record label. So you could sell it as an idea as much as you could sell it as an individual song. And it has lasting power. I mean, people still like Motown, I think, Can you think of anything from the last 30 years that would have the same sort of, the same kind of sense of, that's always going to have an appeal to the broader public? Is there any kind of, Max Martin, he's sort of like the songwriters, the big songwriters now that write hits for, from everybody from Britney Spears to Taylor Swift, I guess. That kind of thing is always going to be popular, but whether it has a long lifespan, I couldn't say.
I stopped listening to new pop music in 2003.
2003?
Very
What happened in 2003?
Coldplay. It was
Okay.
their fault. But I'm very impressed by knowing all about these things. I was amazed. But, I think in terms of length of tracks, I was just looking through. I just wonder, because I think the distinction between fast and slow comes into play, and they're nearly all quite fast.
These songs.
Yeah, I think the Serge Gainsbourg, a quick look through, might be the one that might qualify as a slower song.
Yeah, I guess so.
Which one?
Je t'aime moi non plus.
Yeah.
But there's nobody did any sort of the big ballads, the big slow ones.
That's
there
true.
must be some one-hit
must be.
wonders in there.
There must be. Of all time.
There's an answer to that, actually.
there?
There is a right answer.
An
in terms
objective answer.
Of, yeah. In terms
it?
of sales, I did look it up. I think. Sorry to think about it.
That can be your homework.
Yeah, that'll be for volume 2.
Yeah.
I guess these days you probably say Gangnam Style.
Talking of volume 2, so this is this is a good place to end in a way. I'd just like to finish by commending the book, which when I read it, I realized I learned a huge amount, because you get such a different range of approaches: sociological, historical, musicological. You get close readings of a really rigorous kind of the sort practiced by Dye. You get references to evolutionary psychology, and then people who know their songs so well that they talk about the difference that a particular sound engineer makes to the music, and the different producers. I mean, it's a really exciting piece of collective expertise, which Sarah had the brilliant idea of putting together. Is there a sequel, and can we look forward to, now that's what I call one-hit wonders, 12?
I think there's enough for a sequel. I want to get My Sharona, on paper some point. Yeah, why not?
Excellent.
If Bloomsbury will have us. Is there another Belgian one-hit wonder?
Give me time.
Australia,
They're the publishers of Harry Potter, of course, so they know all about keeping a success going.
It's also the kind of book which I think, if the model could be replicated in other countries, like Italy, France, Germany, and so on, you might have a really exciting franchise on your hands.
Maybe so, yeah. Let's get my copyright in now.
So I'll finish by thanking you all very much for coming, thanking Dye and Sarah for being with us this afternoon, and thanking Torch for organising the event. Thank you very much.
Yeah.